Hello, I'm Ron Squire. Welcome to highlights of the 2025 Formula SimRacing World Championship. Round 5 and the halfway point of the championship is a British Grand Prix at Silverstone. This venue was built on the RAF airbase after its namesake, borders on both the Northamptonshire and Buckinghamshire borders, and has been the primary host of the British Grand Prix since 1987. Despite this fact, Silverstone is the genesis for modern motorsport. Having hosted the first round of the Formula 1 World Championship back in 1950, this circuit has seen a variety of changes across its 75+ year history and presents the drivers with differing corners and challenges. For the first time this season, Janis Bracsock puts himself on pole position, just 1/10 ahead of championship contenders River Machete and Mark Schluter. Zog Zooks keeps himself in contact with the top 3 with 4th, while Sander Callis does his best with 5th. Patrick Hanko is hoping to pull off another surprise out of the bag like in Austria, as he starts from 6th ahead of a dropping performance from Geoffrey Fournier, with the Frenchman only best in 7th. Christian Pascal, in his first race back since Australia, makes it to 8th. Tom Oldenmenger qualifies in 9th in a potential turnaround from Austria, and Jase Latin continues his decent form to make it into the top 10. Matt Tucson and George Zalagianis has to contend with 12th and 13th behind Mirko Mancini. Lucas Viscott struggled in qualifying behind Nando Marza, whilst Andrei Bortowski races for the first time since Australia, temporarily driving for Squire Nation eSports. To the race start, both Bracsock and Machete make solid starts off the line, blocking the opening opportunity for Schluter to pass, while Zooks keeps an eye on the front 3 going into Village. Schluter attempts to overtake Machete on the outside at Village, but the optimal driver closes the door on his championship rival before going into the loop. Hanko makes his first move as he overtakes Zooks going down the Wellington Straight and putting the top 3 on notice. At the end of the opening lap, the top 10 is Bracsock, Machete, Schluter, Hanko, Zooks, Fournier, Callis, Oldenmenger, Latinen and Pascal. Sander Callis did not have a good start. The Estonian drops back to 7th on the opening lap. One man who did not have a good start altogether is Andrei Bortowski. In his first race back since Australia for MV Conquest, the Slovak is a few seconds off the field in his first appearance for Squire Nation eSports, though it is already early days. At the front, Mark Schluter seems to already be in better shape as he looks to try and gain some vital points today, especially after his heartbreak in the last lap in Austria. One team that is seeing a slight improvement from Austria is Vega Valley eSports, having only scraped into the top 10 in the last round. By the time lap 6 comes around, Oldenmenger is already into 8th place, whilst Mancini drops a bit to 12th, but keeping Zalagianis in his sights. Lap 9 and Christian Pascal became the first retirement. The Italian loses control coming out of Stowe and slams into the barrier backwards. Sadly, the race would also end early for River Machete. On lap 11, he voluntarily pulls out after entering the pit lane, citing sickness as Hanko passes him at pit entry. Lap 11 does signify the first stops of the race as Hanko pits in from 4th just after Machete's retirement. The Slovakian rejoins in 11th on a fresh set of hards. Schluter would pit in on the next lap, giving Bracsock some much needed breathing space. The German rejoins in 10th just behind Hanko, who's passed Marza on the previous lap. As a result, all 3 CMT Go Team drivers that are still in the race are in 9th to 11th, whilst all 3 optimal drivers are in the top 3, Janis Bracsock leading from Zog Zooks and Geoffrey Fournier. Bracsock's lead will only last for a further lap, with the Hungarian pitting in on lap 13, as fellow Hungarian Zooks takes the top spot. The optimal driver rejoins in 6th behind George Zalagianis, but Bracsock would overtake the Greek down the Hanger Straight later on in the lap. It would get from bad to worse for Zalagianis on the next lap as he gets overtaken by the CMT Go Team duo of Mark Schluter and Patrick Hanko. As the race goes into quarter distance, the majority of the field is now on hard tyres. Zog Zooks hold up the main honours for Optimal eSports as Sander Callis hounds him down in 2nd. Bracsock's in 3rd and the only driver in the top 10 on fresh mediums. Mark Schluter is keeping an eye on proceedings in 4th ahead of Patrick Hanko. George Zalagianis and Matt Tucson are firmly in 6th and 7th ahead of Fournier. Tom Oldenmenger is holding on into 9th, and a quiet race so far for Jase Latinen in 10th. Lap 17 and Matt Tucson's first race as Australia has seen him reach as high as 7th. However, he will soon lose ground and lose positions, firstly to Fournier, to Oldenmenger, and finally to Latinen. By the time lap 21 rolls around, Janis Bracsock retakes the lead following pit stops for Zooks and Callis, with both Schluter and Hanko within 6 seconds behind. Lap 22 are the candidates for overtake of the season. Sander Callis times his move carefully as Zog Zooks overtakes Tom Oldenmenger going into Copse. Callis, having nearly been caught out by Oldenmenger, not only overtakes the Dutchman before the Magnus and Beckers complex, but takes on Zooks and overtakes the Hungarian going into Magnus himself. And just like that, Callis moves from 7th to 5th in one fell swoop. Halfway through the race on lap 26, and Janis Bracsock makes his second stop of the race. Mark Suter takes over the lead for the first time in the race as Bracsock rejoins in 6th, just behind fellow Hungarian Zsolt Szűcs, but again puts on a fresh batch of mediums, keeping everyone second guessing Bracsock's strategy. Within a few laps after his stop, Bracsock tries to hound down Kallis for 3rd, but the Estonian is not making the optimal driver's task fairly easy. Eventually the Hungarian would take the 3rd place on lap 30, with a simple overtake down the Wellington Straight. That 3rd would become 2nd as Hanko dives into the pits for the 2nd time for fresh hards, as the Slovakian rejoins in 7th. Bracsock now has a clear track to try and hound down and take on Suter for the lead. The first stop for softs took place on lap 32 as Andrzej Pawlowski dives in and rejoins front of Lucas Viscott. Does the Slovakian have an ace up his sleeve? Lap 34, both Schluter and Kallis dive in for their second stops, giving Bracsock the lead for the 3rd time in the race. Schluter and Kallis comes out in both 5th and 6th just behind Hanko. Hanko would let Suter through on lap 36. Further behind, going into lap 37, Jase Latin makes a classy overtake on George Zalgianis, taking on the Greek on the outside of Stowe. Lap 40 and Bracsock makes his 3rd stop of the race, bewildering everyone by putting fresh softs for the first time. The Hungarian rejoins in 3rd while Szűcs pits in just behind on fresh mediums. Szűcs rejoins behind teammate Fournier in 5th. So as the field goes into the final 10 laps of the race, it is pretty much anyone's race. Mark Suter assumes the lead after both the Optimals pit, but just under 2 seconds ahead of Patrick Hanko. Janis Bracsock can hopefully put the hammer down with softs in 3rd, while Sander Kallis keeps himself within touching distance of the top 3. Fournier and Szűcs keep each other company in 5th and 6th. Tom Oldenmenger sees a vast improvement with 7th, as has Jase Latin, the Finn now on hards, taking 8th. Whilst Mirko Mancini just takes 9th from George Zalgianis after the Greek makes his own stop for hards. One battle to finish off an unpredictable race is Hanko vs Bracsock. Since the Hungarian made a stop for softs just 3 laps ago, the optimal driver is piling gargantuan amounts of pressure on Hanko for 2nd. Bracsock will eventually make his move down the Wellington Straight, overtaking the Slovakian on the outside of Brooklands with a satisfying overtake on Hanko. The race sadly won't be a happy ending for Lucas Viscott. Having already been a lap down, the Czech driver makes a massive mistake at Beckett's, spinning off and crashing out, in effect becoming the 3rd retirement of the Grand Prix on lap 46. Back at the front, Janis Bracsock is now seriously putting the hammer down, with the Hungarian now eyeing up a potential race win for Mark Suter. The optimal driver taking a few tenths out of the German's lead each lap since overtaking Hanko. Into the penultimate lap, and Bracsock's all over the back of Schluter. But one thing Bracsock hasn't taken into account: the more the Hungarian attacks, the more wear the tyres will get. And with Schluter's heart now breaking in, the German can now start to build a big enough gap all the way to the finish line. Taking his first win since Malaysia, Mark Schluter reaffirms his lead in the championship with a stellar performance. Janis Bracsock pushes hard as he can to claim 2nd, whilst Patrick Hanko once again appears on the podium with 3rd. It's 4 4th places in a row for Sander Kallis, the Estonian proving once again why he's Mr. Consistent in FSR. Zsolt Szűcs keeps in touch with the top 5 with 5th place ahead of a resurging Tom Oldenmenger. Jase Latin scores MV Conquest's first top 10 finish of the season with a brilliant 7th place ahead of Mirko Mancini, with the other 2 ground effects of Zalgianis and Tucson rounding out the top 10. So after 5 rounds, the Drivers' Championship standing sees Suter extend his lead to 37 points. Sander Kallis, with his consistent finishes, overtakes River Machete by 1 point. Jeffrey Fournier and Patrick Hanko tie up 4th place in the standings with both drivers on 61 points. Tom Oldenmenger, despite his resurgency at Silverstone, slips back down to 6th with 56 points, just 4 ahead of Zsolt Szűcs in 7th. Janis Bracsock leaps ahead of George Zalgianis on 45 points, whilst Jase Latin breaks into the top 10 for the first time this season. In the constructors' standings, the positions remain the same, with Optimal eSports still leading, but with the gap now reduced to 12 points to the CMT GOAT team. Ground Effect break into triple digits on points, just 23 ahead of Vega Valley eSports. MV Conquest gain vital points with the gap reduced slightly, while Squire Nation eSports gain their first points thanks to Andrzej Bortowski's cameo. The next race is this weekend at Spa-Francorchamps for the Belgian Grand Prix on Sunday the 28th of September. And you can watch that race live as it happens right here on our YouTube channel. Qualifying begins at 8:30 PM GMT, with the race starting at 8:45 PM GMT. In the meantime, you can join on our forums at formula-racing.net, as well as our Discord server for up-to-date information and joining on the community. The links are in the description below, and you can check out our socials on Facebook, Instagram and TikTok. We hope you enjoyed today's presentation. I'm Ron Squire, and join us for the next round of the 2025 Formula Sim Racing World Championship.